glad you could make it again tonight. You know, every now and then a story comes along, and I have to just read it twice. And I don't always know who sends these stories in. And truth be told, sometimes that's for the best. But this one, well, it didn't come with a name that I could share or a location that I could pin down. Just a simple request. Tell it right. What follows is a quiet kind of tale, the kind that creeps in like smoke through the trees. It starts high above the forest floor in a tower built to watch for fire. But the eyes up there, they saw something else, something tall, something big, something strange, something that did not belong. So pack your saddlebags. Get on up in the saddle. Tonight's journey into Sasquatch Valley is going to take us high up into that tower that overlooks an old forest. But as we keep watch with him, stay vigilant. Keep your eyes open, because something out there watches the fire watcher. An old friend reached out to me recently. He knows I'm big on Bigfoot, and he wanted me to pass on this to the proper channels. Be thankful that he wrote this. As much as I am a Bigfoot enthusiast, I would never have been able to retell this story in a way that does it justice. For context, I am a fire lookout. I work for a national forest reservation, and due to the nature of my work, I have to keep my name and the name of the reservation anonymous. I like being a fire lookout, but as of recent, this kind of work has dwindled for me outside of fire season. For that and many other reasons, I'd rather not take my chances in terms of sharing too much information to the public. In any case, this happened last year during fire season. I've been doing this for a long time, and was lucky enough to secure this spot again last summer, having staffed this particular fire lookout before in the past. This happened at the very beginning of the season. I remember because we'd had a thunderstorm roll in the first couple days of the month, and I'd observed 2 lightning strikes that touched ground in my neck of the woods. Luckily, nothing ignited during the storm, but I was still required to record the locations of the strikes and continued to monitor them for the next 2 weeks to watch for any signs of ignition. Even when lightning doesn't necessarily cause a fire outright, the points where it does touch ground are especially susceptible to catching fire in the days following, so we have to be extra cautious in regards to these sites. Now, I'll often receive visitors from time to time. These are usually just curious hikers and other outdoor enthusiasts who want to check out the tower. Sometimes I'll see repeat visitors or campers who want to meet me and talk about what they should look out for. Rangers will drop off safety pamphlets for me to hand out to these types of folks to save me the trouble of explaining everything. You know, standard stuff with Smokey Bear on the cover and what have you. However, I only had a few of these passers-by come say hi to me in those several days that I was monitoring the lightning strikes. The thunderstorm happened at the tail end of the weekend, and we don't get as many visitors on the weekdays, especially during peak fire season. One of the groups that came through, however, was a handful of big game hunters who were regulars this time of year. I had met them a couple of years before and even remembered their names. They told me they would be passing through the area in the next few days and asked if there was anything they should watch out for. I told them about the ignition spots, and they asked if they could mark them with some hunter's tape. I gave them the okay so long as they agreed to remove them before they left the forest. After the hunters left, things slowed down. I kept an eye on the lightning sites, which were now marked by bright, fluorescent hunter's orange tape. I remember a few hikers walking by and waving, but not much else. Time crept by, and I didn't see the hunters again, even as the sun began to set. I remember being a little peeved that they did not remove their tape before they left the area, but I figured they'd be back early in the morning and I could give them an earful then. I checked on the lightning sites every couple of hours. It was around 7 o'clock in the evening when I went out with my binoculars to scan them over. When I set my sights on one of the locations, I thought I was seeing one of the hunters from the group picking up the hunter's tape, which they had stuck into the ground with thin stakes. It took me several seconds to register that what I was looking at was not a human. The size tipped me off first, of course. Judging by the scale provided by surrounding trees and the stake in the ground, it had to be just short of 8 feet tall. There wasn't a whole lot of daylight left to show the creature in fine detail, but their body was consistently dark and hairy all the way down. Their coat seemed especially thick. It made me sweat just thinking of living a life under all that fur. Its limbs were quite long, and it was standing on 2 legs as thick as tree trunks. I also couldn't make out much of a face, but I did pick up on some slight discoloration somewhere on its head where a face would be. When it turned just the right way, I could maybe see a glint that denoted its eyes. I've been doing fire lookout jobs for a while, and I've heard a few colleagues claim they've spied a thing or two that looked like it could have been a Sasquatch. But this was beyond anything I could have imagined. But there could be no doubt. I was staring at the Bigfoot. Or, at least, a Bigfoot, I guess. At the time, I was not very well read on the subject. I had no idea that it was somewhat of a localized phenomena, with different types and cousins of various nomenclatures, or at least that's what it sounds like from what I've learned since this encounter. I just stood there with my binoculars trained on the Bigfoot for an especially long time, gawking and following it. It did not move much. It seemed preoccupied with picking at the piece of hunter's tape that it had found. For a moment, I thought to call one of the other lookout towers. I don't know why. It was mostly an impulse to talk to someone and just say, "Hey, are you seeing this too?" It wouldn't have done much good, though, as the various lookout towers are a good distance away from each other, for a reason. We each have hundreds of thousands of acres of forest to monitor. That's not a lot of call for overlap. And even if I had called it in, I'm not sure what would happen after that point. There's every reason to expect that the ranger I spoke to would just laugh at me and brush it off. Really, though, I was in awe of it. Call me a romantic, but I was just sort of taken with being able to witness such a majestic creature in a way that not many people have been lucky enough to experience. I could hardly keep my eyes off of it for more than a few seconds, so I just watched it do its thing for a while. Now, funnily enough, it remained perfectly preoccupied with the hunter's tape, and it eventually managed to untangle it from the stake with what looked like primate-adjacent fingers. The Bigfoot examined the tape for a moment, regarding it at arm's length, and then giving it a quick sniff. Then it whirled around and seemed to be surveying the trees around it. I wasn't sure what it was looking for, and I got the feeling that even it wasn't sure either. It walked around a little bit, maybe just a few Bigfoot-sized paces to and fro, keeping its eyes upward. It seemed to be looking up and into the tree branches. Finally, it picked one tree within close proximity, and it brought its arms up to clutch at a low-hanging branch. At least, the branch was low-hanging in Sasquatch terms. Would have taken a bit more effort for the average human. The Bigfoot then got to work with the hunter's tape and essentially tied it into the branch that it had picked out. At this point, I was absolutely mesmerized. I felt like a zoologist or something, having the privilege of observing a real Sasquatch from afar as it openly displayed what I thought was very curious behavior. I wondered to myself why it was doing this. I was thinking in terms of animal instincts, and what survival-driven purposes playing with hunter's tape would have served. I've eventually come to the conclusion that this wasn't survival-based in the least. This was just plain old Sasquatch-flavored whimsy. I don't know why, but I think I would have had an easier time wrapping my head around the whole thing if I'd just seen it foraging for food or even just relieving itself on a tree. But no, not only was I lucky enough to witness Bigfoot activity, I even got to see it in a state of curiosity. After trying a few times to secure the little ribbon of hunter's tape onto the branch, Bigfoot managed to get it in an acceptable knot that seemed to hold fast. And when it was done, it just stood there, arms at its side, admiring its own handiwork. It was almost endearing, honestly. Now, since it had been right at the spot where I'd identified a lightning strike, I could say with utmost certainty that Bigfoot showed up 22 acres away from my tower, a more than respectable distance for my observation purposes. It didn't have a clue I was watching it. And I continued to watch it even as it lost interest in this particular area and walked on its 2 big feet away from my jurisdiction. I watched it slip between the trees at a leisurely stroll away until it was too far away and too dark for me to make out. Even after I lost sight of it, however, I just kept watching for signs of it, hoping it would show up again at some point. I scanned the forest almost nonstop for the next 2 hours, finally putting down my binoculars for good when there was no more daylight to be spared. I went back into my tower, still wired from the adrenaline of seeing an actual Bigfoot in person. I wondered to myself if maybe there was another explanation for what I had seen, if maybe it was someone in a suit playing tricks on innocent bystanders. But that didn't make much sense given what I saw it do. It just didn't seem like the kind of behavior a hoaxer would choose to display. If it were me, at least, I would simply walk past witnesses like in the Patterson film and call it a day. No, I was sure that what I saw was the real deal, and I was kind of giddy about it, to be honest. So often this job can be either boring or stressful, and the pendulum swings hard in either direction without a whole lot of moments in between. Being in the middle of nature had always been a perk, don't get me wrong, but of all the wildlife I've seen while on the job, nothing came even close to seeing an actual Bigfoot. The next day, I was convinced that this time I would radio someone about Bigfoot if I saw it again. It was just too remarkable of a thing not to share with someone else. It felt like it was physically hurting me to not talk to anyone about it. Sure enough, I was lucky enough to find it again. Granted, I might have missed it had I not gotten up so early and also continued to search the forest like a madman. But I did find it, and this time it was about 36 acres away and in the opposite direction. And this second time I saw it, it wasn't alone. My jaw dropped when my binoculars landed on the very friend I observed the day before, this time accompanied by 2 much smaller versions of itself. There they were, a parent and its 2 children, striding across the forest floor without a care in the world. Now, to be fair, this could have been another Bigfoot entirely, and I might not have been able to say for sure that I could tell the difference. I like to think that I was a particular expert on what the first Bigfoot looked like, having watched it for so long. But in the light of the morning, I was beginning to doubt myself. There was a very noticeable auburn kind of sheen to the parent's hair that I wasn't sure if I clocked the day before. One thing was for sure. The little ones at its side were definitely miniature versions of their mother or father. I'm sorry to say that while I did observe this Bigfoot and its offspring for a not insignificant amount of time, I'm still not an expert in anatomical differences of biological sex in animals, especially not Bigfoot. Try as I might, nothing I saw really clarified that aspect for me. If I had to guess, I'd say it was the mom. But heck if I know. Anyway, to say I was fascinated would have been the understatement of the year. For all my persistence, I hadn't the slightest hope that morning that I would actually lay eyes on Bigfoot again less than a day later. And now I had the extraordinary fortune to see the whole clan. And I think that made all the difference to me. The Bigfoot family didn't stay in my tower's area for very long, and as I watched them leave, the little Bigfoot cubs playing and dancing around their parent, and generally being as rambunctious and mischievous as all children are known to be, I decided I didn't really want to let anyone in on my little secret. Maybe it was selfish of me to keep it to myself this long, but it seemed wrong to me at the time to disturb their peace. Even if someone had believed me enough to try to investigate, it seemed a shame to interfere in the lives of such rare and majestic creatures. So I watched them carry on and eventually leave the range of my tower. Later that day, maybe around 3 in the afternoon, the hunters from the day before paid me a visit. They told me that they had taken down the tape at one of the spots they'd marked, but the funniest thing had happened to the other one. Their tape somehow ended up in a tree nearby. They asked me if I had put it up there. I brushed it off, saying no, it wasn't me. Must have just been some bored hikers who messed with it while they were passing through the area. I kept an eye out for Bigfoot and its family for the rest of the fire season, but I suppose they'd moved on for good. Or if they did come by at any point after that, I wasn't looking for them closely enough. I'm stationed at another lookout this year, but I think about Bigfoot fondly now. I figure that maybe now it's safe to tell others about what I experienced, as I'm not sure if I'll be working at that tower again anytime soon. If I do get back there, you can bet I'll be looking for my large and furry friend. And there you have it. One fire lookout, a couple of quiet days, and some unforgettable sightings. I don't know about you, but there's something about that image that's going to stick with me. A creature of legend, carefully tying a piece of hunter's tape into a tree like it was leaving a message that only others in the woods could read. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Just how much these things see and how much they understand. Now, whether you believe it was a curious moment of Bigfoot behavior or just some wild yarn spun from someone with too much solitude on their hands, well, I'll leave that up to you. But I will say this. Some folks go their entire lives never seeing a single thing out of the ordinary. And others? Well, just once, maybe twice, they'll catch a glimpse of something really big, something hairy, and something that changes the way they look at the world forever. Thanks for riding along with me tonight into Sasquatch Valley. I will see you all the next time, right here on Buckeye Bigfoot, where the woods are deep, stories are real, and the truth, well, it might just be standing right outside your window.